मे न च भाति किञ्चित् तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो तेजस्तरन्ति तरसा त्वयि तृप्ततृष्णा रागे कृते ऋतपथे त्वयि राम कृष्णे मर्त्यामृतं तव पदं मरणोन्मिनाशं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो कृत्यं करोति कलुषं कुहकान्तकारी स्नान्तं शिवं सुविमलं तन्नाम नाथ यस्मादहं शरणो जगदेका गम्य तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्म स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। सर्वमङ्गला माङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थ साधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। सृष्टिस्थिति विनाशानां शक्ति भूते सनातनी गुणाश्रये गुणमयी शरणागत दीनार्त परित्राण परायणे सर्व शारदे हरे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते जय 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 महामाई की जय जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण देव की जय जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय।
हेलो।
नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरे सच्चेत सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे So we were discussing this lecture, Vivekananda, Absolute and the Manifestation. And we were discussing essentially this philosophical antipodes, even in the context of Advaita Vedanta, where there are these two concepts, the one of the absolute or pure consciousness, and then there is this notion of Maya or space-time and causation. And the question was raised that, well, you're saying that this is supposed to be a philosophy of non-duality, absence of duality, yet willy-nilly one has come to a position where one talks of this duality, subtle but duality nevertheless, between the pure consciousness or the absolute on the one hand and time-space causation or Maya on the other. And an answer was given to this, that this is not quite a point of view, this is not quite a contradiction, basically because it's only when we are conditioned by space-time and causation, conditioned by Maya, so to speak, that we think that there is this separate thing called consciousness and this separate thing called the unconscious. And because we are accustomed to thinking in terms of these dualities, conscious versus the unconscious, that we have to speak in terms of these dualities of pure consciousness on the one hand and space-time causation or Maya on the other. What then is the conclusion, the Siddhanta? And the idea here is that this is not something that's a matter of philosophical speculation. It's not one that is a matter merely of intellectual ratiocination, but rather something that needs to be practiced and achieved or made real in one's own existence. How does one go about doing that? And the instrument for that is really this introspective, analytical mind, the enquiring mind in the deepest sense of the term. So pick up that faculty. We are supposed to be picking up that faculty within ourselves, guided by this fervor, by this drive for truth above everything else. And the instrument that we use is the questioning of our common sense, taking for granted of what we see around us as reality. I'm tempted to quote this famous agnostic philosopher Bertrand Russell. In one of his collections of essays, he talks about what we call naive realism. Naive realism is the point of view that things are as they are. And he says, well, naive realism, which is the point of view that things are as they are, lead us into the scientific enquiry, which tells us that what we see around us are not really chairs, tables, etc., but protons, electrons, and other more subtler entities. And then he makes this characteristically amusing comment. He says, therefore, naive realism tells us, which is the point of view that things are as they are, lead us to the point that things are not as they are. Naive realism, therefore, if true, is false, hence it is false. Well, this is somewhat amusing, but essentially what it tells us, what even such a philosopher basically tells us to do, is pursue this enquiry to the hilt, not being satisfied by these stopgap answers which are given in books, which are given in various doctrines, which are given in various theologies. Those are not meant to be the truths. They are supposed to be, at best, a faint shadow of the truth. And the truth has to be discovered for oneself, and the instrument that one can use along the way is this fine, one-pointed method of enquiry. Not casual armchair philosophical speculation, but an active enquiry fueled by this deep desire for truth above everything else. With this in place, let us return to this particular lecture. I'll read out this one reasonably long paragraph, and then we'll come back to the topic and discuss various things in various Upanishads which are related to this. The whole of this universe, therefore, is, as it were, a peculiar form. The Absolute is that ocean, while you and I and suns and stars and everything else are various waves of that ocean. And what makes the waves different? Only the form. And that form is time, space, and causation, all entirely dependent on the wave. A few sentences here, but it summarizes a lot of things. First, this duality between the absolute or consciousness on the one hand and the phenomenal world whose greatest abstraction is time, space, and causation, and everything we perceive is in and through that latter framework. And then he says this one other thing which is rather poignant or penetrating in terms of an insight. The wave on the ocean is defined purely in terms of its form. Take that form away, and what you have left is the ocean and nothing else. Say a little fish which is in the water underneath the shape of a wave. That fish will not be able to distinguish between that wave and the ocean. So if you are not in a position to perceive the form, the ocean alone remains. All right? And then he does this one other identification. He says, this form is nothing but time, space, and causation. The wave as an event is something that captures time. The wave as a shape is something that captures space. And a sequence of waves is what captures causation. Or a movement of a wave is what captures causation. Thus, this particular identification is something we should clearly bear in mind, that we are accustomed to thinking in terms of the world, thinking of the world in terms of this particular universal framework of time, space, and causation. Well, that's a habit that we have. Take that habit away, and what is left is pure consciousness. Take that habit away consciously. That's, I think, what is being hinted at. Not something that is to be done unconsciously, but reflect on one's individual experiences in a day-to-day sense. Not something mystical, not something mysterious, hidden in some twilight, but something that we are experiencing in a common sense, tangible fashion. What is one suggesting? And there one is suggesting it's a pointer to a part of our experience in a day-to-day way where that notion of time, space, and causation vanishes, or at least gets changed. And we spoke about last time this subjective state called dreaming, a wonderful state indeed, where we are not constrained by the restrictions that the physical world imposes on us. We imagine we are flying, we imagine we are in some particular state of extreme joy, etc., etc. And that which has caused us joy might or might not cause us particular joy during our waking state. So, the notion of causality that we are accustomed to in our waking state very often gets modified. We still have a notion of causality in dreams, but it is not the same as the one that we have in our waking state. And finally, in our deep sleep, this notion of space and time and causation entirely vanishes. We are no longer accustomed to thinking at all. And since we are not thinking at all in deep sleep, there is no time, there is no space, there is no causation. The sense of time vanishes, the sense of space vanishes, the sense of causality vanishes. Which means, in our consciousness itself, there is an experience which suggests that we can get out of this time, space, and causation. We are not accustomed to thinking about deep sleep, but suppose we could make that state conscious, fully aware of that state in which we are asleep without thought. If we could make that state conscious fully, when we would be out of the thraldom of space, time, and causation, we would be out of the thraldom of what Vedanta calls Maya. Which means that in our consciousness itself, the solution to the problem is hidden. This seeking of knowledge and truth above everything else, this twilight in which we live in our day-to-day lives, in our waking state, where truth is mixed up with falsehood, where clarity is mixed up with confusion, there is a state in our day-to-day existence where this duality vanishes. And the aspiration, therefore, is to make that state fully conscious. Does that mean that we live only in a certain sense, a certain state of torpor, a state of stupor, where we are basically half asleep, somnambulistic? That's not what is being suggested. In fact, in this great Upanishad, perhaps the shortest of Upanishads, the Mandukya Upanishad, these states are analyzed, these subjective states of waking, dream, and deep sleep are analyzed, and they are given to us. I mean, we are essentially asked to focus our attention on the memory, on the thoughts of these states, so that they no longer remain a mystery to us. These things which define our day-to-day existence is something that we take for granted most of the time and do not spend the time necessary to look into them in some depth. So this is what I'd like to quote from the Mandukya Upanishad a little bit, so that we have some sense of what these states are. And here, this is what is being talked about, the deep sleep state, or as it's called, Sushupti in Vedanta. Yatra supto na kanchana kamam kamayate. While asleep, in such a state, one desires nothing. Na kanchana swapnam pashyati. Nor does one perceive any dreams. Tat sushuptam. That state of the mind is called Sushupti. Sushuptasthano eki bhuta pragyana ghana. Eva anandamayo hi anandabhuk cheto mukha pragya strityapadaha. So this third state also called Sushupti. What happens there? Eki Bhuta. All our individual thoughts become unified. Pragyana Ghana. All the little individual elements of knowledge become dissolved into its own universal essence. This is the description of that state, but we are not aware of it. That's the tragedy of this situation, of the human situations, so to speak. And then he goes on, then the Upanishad goes on to describe it further. Esha Sarveshwara, Esha Sarvagya, Esha Antaryami, Esha Yonihi, Sarvasya Prabhava Apyayo hi Bhutanam. Esha Sarveshwara. This state is the ruler of all. All our individual tendencies, our individual acumen for knowledge, all of it gets absorbed in that state in a unified way, but we are not aware of it. So this collection, in some places, this is called the seed state, so to speak. The mind gets resolved into a potential to break into waves without breaking into waves at that moment. So it at that state has the potential to create this world around us, which means it has the potential to project the mind. That is why it's called the causal state. This is the Sushupti. That is what we need to make conscious, be fully aware of in subsequent, in terms of our personal practice. But then if we are not aware of anything in this state of deep sleep, what is our way to it? After all, every time we fall into deep sleep, we fall into deep sleep. We are not aware of anything. But then the Upanishad penetrates deeper. Do you think at any point of time after coming out of that deep sleep state that you were not there? It was there, but I was I was in deep sleep. I did not know anything. This is the recollection that each of us has, which means that there is something, some aspect of ourselves which is there even in that deep sleep state, covered up in ignorance, in the sense that we are not able to know in the way we know anything in our waking or dream states. But we never say, I was not there. Well, what was there? What aspect of us was there? And this is the enquiry, and the answer is given here. Na anta pragyam. This is probably the most important verse or mantra in the Mandukya Upanishad. Na anta pragyam, na bahi pragyam, na ubhayata pragyam, na pragyana ghanam, na pragyam, na apragyam. See, this whole thing is described by not this, not this. Na anta pragyam. It is not the state where one's mind is turned inwards, basically the dream state. Na bahish pragyam. Nor is it the one where the consciousness is directed outward, nor is it the waking state. Na ubhayata pragyam, the half dream, half waking, which is the state we come across when we are about to wake up or about to go to sleep, which means half directed outward, half directed inward. Na pragyana ghana. Nor is it the state where everything resolves into its causal state. Na pragyam, nor is it consciousness. Na apragyam, nor is it unconsciousness. What one is trying to say here is that these logical dualities, which are the habits of our mind, they do not exist, because yes and no and these antipodes of logic are functions of our consciousness. They do not encapsulate consciousness. So in order to catch hold of it, we need to penetrate deeper through these various states. And what they go on to say subsequently is that once you have caught hold of that consciousness which pervades deep sleep, when the mind is not functioning in the usual way of throwing up waves, we have caught hold of that one aspect of our being which interpenetrates not just our deep sleep, but our waking and dream also. Because if it was something that was there only in deep sleep, then it would get negated in our waking state, in our dream states. So that is not what one is gunning for. One is gunning for this I, the substratum on which all these states come and go. These three states are caught within, essentially falling off into deep sleep, waking up, coming out of deep sleep. These things are points where time-space causation come in. And in deep sleep that vanishes, but we are not aware. We are not aware of that aspect of our being which refers to these experiences as a witness. That, if it is caught, is what is called Turiya in this Upanishad. Turiya literally means the fourth. Fourth means not something that is encapsulated by these three states. It's a pointer to something that is beyond. Not in any mystical sense, not in any mysterious sense, but as something that is there with us all the time. In fact, time itself is a product of this deeper aspect of our being, which we refer to as consciousness. And then he describes it further, he meaning the Upanishad. Adrishtam, not seen. Avyavaharyam, cannot be used. Agrahyam, cannot be caught conceptually. Alakshanam, without any defining attributes. Achintyam, cannot be thought of. Avyapadesham, does not occupy space. Ekatma pratyaya saram. When we say one, what does one mean? The core, this enquiry into what does one mean, what does unification mean, leads us to this pratyaya. Atma pratyaya saram. This feeling, this idea that I exist, is something that is there with us all the time. We take it for granted without enquiry. Can we not enquire into it? Where that dissolves at the end of this process of enquiry. That's what Ek Atma Pratyaya Saram. Saram means the essence. Pratyaya means this awareness. Ek Atma, I am, I exist. So essentially, this particular awareness pushed to the hilt, enquired into to the hilt, till the mind loses its usual naughtiness of fluctuating in terms of various thoughts. The end process of that enquiry. Ekatma pratyaya saram. Is that something agitated? No, it cannot be. Shantam, peaceful. Shivam, advaitam. Shivam means of great blessedness. Shantam, Shivam, advaitam. Chaturtham manyante. That is called the fourth Turiya. Sa Atma. That is the essence. Sa Vigneya. That is to be known. Essentially, what is being done here is that there are pitfalls on the way of this enquiry. It could take the waking state as the be-all and end-all. You say, well, that would be inadequate knowledge. What then? Take the waking, take the dream, put them together, and then, well, there is this time, space, and causation. So not enough. Why? Because there's a third state. Look at it. It is part of your and my daily experience. This sushupti, this state of deep sleep, where this causality vanishes. But then I don't know anything. Are you trying to suggest that, look, this state where nothing is known is the reality that we are after? After all, we don't have any sense of reality then. And it says, no. But inquire to whom this waking state, this dream, this deep sleep happens. And we all say it happens to me. This ekatma, this me, what exactly is it about? Enquiring into it and seeing the onset of these various states coming and going on this consciousness. That is to be inquired into. Fine. Now, here's the problem. All right. It's all very fine to say, acknowledge, at least theoretically, intellectually, that it is the essence of these three states. But how are we going to proceed towards it? How do we cultivate the awareness that allows us to say, in truth, not as some kind of a fictitious speculation, fictitious philosophical speculation, but as a truth, that it is to the real essence of my being that this dream, this waking state, and this deep sleep happens. How do we proceed towards it? After all, any practice, any cultivation of clear knowledge is done during the waking state itself. We are not aware of any practice that we do in the dreams. We are not aware of any conscious practice that we do in deep sleep. So finally, we are left with the waking state itself. And if there is to be a practice to cultivate this awareness, it has to be done in the waking state itself. And how does one go about doing it? These three states are supposed to be a hint that in and through even this waking state, the essence of your being is shining. Can one catch hold of it? Is there a waking state experience itself which points us to the fact that there is an aspect of our being that is not caught within this framework of time, space, and causation? So if we can catch hold of that in the waking state itself, then we'll be able to say, this is exactly what the Mandukya Upanishad was saying as the state or as an aspect of our being which was there in deep sleep, which is there in dream. Because if we are not aware of it in the waking state, it will probably vanish in dreams. It will probably vanish in the deep sleep state also. And the answer, indeed, yes. And the answer, the practice, is fairly simple. Simple to state, hard to do. But what is that state? Essentially, we've mentioned this before, zillions of times. It is maintaining full awareness of the present moment. The only thing that we have for certain is the present moment. But the mind is habituated in living in the past in terms of regrets, or I could have done that better, form of regret again, or why did such and such person talk in such and such way to me? Why did such and such person misbehave? Again, living in the past. Or I shall do such and such thing tomorrow, etc., etc. That means some speculation about the future. In the process, losing the one thing that is certain, namely the present moment. But once one catches hold of or tries to catch hold of the present moment to some extent, one begins to understand the truth of these statements, that the past and the future are defined only in terms of this present moment. And if we can catch hold of it, I mean, where is the tomorrow? The tomorrow is not definable except in terms of the today. The yesterday is not definable except in terms of the today. The one thing that is there with us, which we take for granted and and use it as the basis for all our knowledge, for all our speculations, is the today, is the here, is the now. And so space is to be understood in terms of the here. But we put it in this cockeyed way and reverse things. We are accustomed to thinking in terms of time, space, and causation, where there's a here and a there. But where is the there except in terms of the here? Without a reference base point to a point in space right here, there is no there. Without a reference in time to a base point in this moment, there is no past, there is no future. So the one thing that is certain is the here and the now. And the practice, therefore, is to catch hold of the here and now and understand that everything else is defined in terms of it. This catching hold of the here and now is really the aim and end of all spiritual practice, so to speak. All of it. This focusing of the mind, be it through work, be it through devotion, be it through discrimination and analysis, be it through concentration of mind, all of it is an attempt to catch hold of the present moment and the present point in space. Catching hold of the here and now is the aim and end of all this. So all of the rest of it is a science that trains our mind to going towards this thing that we keep slipping or slipping past. Something that we do not catch hold of. Our minds are accustomed to being occupied with various thoughts rather than focusing on its own source. This here and now, which in terms of this time, space and causation can still be conceived of, is a pointer to that consciousness which is absolute. But as soon as one catches hold of it, then what has happened? If one is here all the time, there is no there. Space vanishes. If one is at the moment, in the now, there is no past, there is no future. Time vanishes. Once space and time vanishes, causation vanishes. Which means that which we perceived as duality, as something, there is this other thing called space-time and causation, and there is this other thing called consciousness. This duality has itself vanished. How? Through this simple process of trying to maintain full awareness in the present moment, in the present point, in space. Various other mechanisms have been suggested, and that this aspect of our being, this timeless, spaceless aspect of our being, is really the answer to various difficult questions, is something that various Upanishads, I have mentioned the Mandukya Upanishad here, and we'll conclude by a few passages from the Kathopanishad, where also as an answer to a very different question, the same answer is provided. Recall that in the Kathopanishad, Nachiketa asks, his question is something like this: Ya iyam prete, yeyam prete, vichikitsa manushye, asti iti eke, nayam asti iti cha eke. When one dies, some say one is, one continues to be, some say one ceases to be. What is the correct answer to this? This is an existential question. It is not something philosophical. Faced with death, this question appears in each of our minds. Animals react to it. Elephants have this capacity to grieve. They take trips to in certain parts of Africa, there are these elephant graveyards where elephants go to die. And those elephants that are alive go there. There is this pervasive notion of death and its mystery. So it is an existential problem that Nachiketa is asking about. Yama in answer does not spin a yarn. He does not say there are heavens and hells and rebirths and reincarnations, etc., etc. He goes to the core of the issue and gives an answer in terms of the science of one's being. He does not spin yarns, does not tell Nachiketa nice, interesting stories for belief. He basically leads him on the path of enquiry to get to the truth, which is why the answer is given in terms of Atma Vidya. He does not talk about rebirth or other doctrines. The answer is given precisely in terms of this Atma Jnana. And there's this sequence of shlokas in the second 2.1. So second chapter, the Kathopanishad is divided in 2 chapters with 3 sub-chapters each. This is in the first sub-chapter of the second chapter. Angushta matra purusho madhya atmani tishtati ishana bhuta bhavyasya na tato vijugupsate etad vaitat. Etad vaitat is important. This is the answer to your question. That's what it means. This is what you seek. That's what this etad vaitat means. He does not say this is not. He does not give an answer in terms of stories. That's the job of Puranas. Here, the direct answer without any claptrap is given. This angushta matra purusha madhya atmani tishtati. This point, this locus of consciousness in you. When we say I am, there is a certain feeling. We do not touch our finger and say I am. There is a certain sense of I am that we carry with us. And that focusing of that, angushta matra, it's only on a small part of somewhere in the middle of our chest. That angushta matra purushaha, this locus of consciousness, is what is pointed to. And then, Ishana bhuta bhavyasya. Ishana means ruler. Of what? Bhuta bhavyasya. Of the past and the future. Bhuta means past and the bhavishya is the future. This is the ruler. This is poetic language. The ruler of the past and the present. You unravel it and you get back to what we were discussing. It is the present moment which is the same as consciousness, in terms of which the past and the future are defined. Catching hold of this angushta matra purusha, this little locus of consciousness in ourselves. People who practice meditation on an image or on some thought in that particular position, so to speak. This deeper human psychology is what is being pointed to by basically the Upanishad saying that sensation, focus on it. So what you get through enquiring into that particular sensation is what you are seeking. That is the ruler of the past and the future. And it keeps on repeating. Angushta matra purusha jyotiriva adhumakaha Ishano bhutabhavyasya sa eva adya sa u shvaha etadvaitat. Read this again. Angushta matra purusho jyotirva adhumakaha Ishano bhutabhavyasya sa eva adya sa u shvaha etadvaitat. Again, etadvaitat. Again, it's a pointer. This is what you are seeking. Again, Angushtamatra Purusha, it's this point of consciousness. And then he gives a nice adjective, Jyotir iva adhumakaha. Jyoti means a light. Adhumakaha, not covered in smoke. Clarity, full clarity, without any conflating, confusing smoke around it. Again, Ishano Bhutabhavyasya, the ruler of the past and the future. It is this consciousness uncluttered, unconfused by the usual plays of the mind. The plays of the mind are as it were, compared with smoke, not the clear light. This clear light, Jyotira Jyoti Ujala Riddhi Kandara, we sing this. That Jyoti, that clear light, not light in terms of physical light, but that capacity for knowledge, without confusion, with complete clarity. That, the locus of that is in our hearts. Catch hold of it, focus on it. And here's one more, and we'll conclude with this one. Angushta matra purushontaratma sada jananam hridaye sannivishta tang swachharirat pravihet munjat iva ishikam dhairyena. Again, Angushta matra purusha. Again, this spot of consciousness like a little thumb. Angushta matra purusho antaratma sada jananam hridaye sannivishta. Located as a spot of consciousness in our hearts. Tam swachharirat pravrihet. It is to be separated out. And this really is the discipline. It is to be separated out from swacharira, which means this spot of consciousness is to be grasped as something that is not this body, not this mind. This is discrimination, this is analysis. Munjat iva ishikam dhairyena. In the same way as the husk is removed to get hold of the kernel. The husk of the rice is removed and the seed, which is the rice, is caught hold of. This analysis is the practice. This consciousness, that we are conscious of various things, is something that is obvious to us. But can we catch hold of that conscious aspect of ourselves, untrammeled by various individual thoughts, various individual perceptions? This lack of conflation with objects we are seeing, with thoughts we are thinking, this lack of identification, this refusal to identify with one's thoughts, with one's perceptions, and keeping focused on this locus of consciousness in ourselves. This is this twin practice of Viveka Vairagya. Ignoring the phenomenal, that is called Vairagya. And this analysis, separation of these two is called Viveka, or this capacity to analyze these two into different aspects. This too, it's not just in the Upanishads. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's one particular chapter, Kshetra Kshetragna Vibhaga Yoga, chapter 13, which focuses precisely on this capacity to analyze. to separate out the phenomenal from this aspect of our being called pure consciousness. The last verse of that summarizes this process and essentially promises that somebody who proceeds along it and succeeds essentially gets the answer, the real answer to these deeper questions. What is that verse? Kshetra kshetra gnayor evam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti mokshancha ye viduryanti te param. Kshetra kshetragna. This kshetra, this body-mind complex, which is the object of our knowledge. And the kshetragna, one who knows that. One who knows that is not the same as that which one knows. This is the subject separating itself off from the object. Kshetra kshetragnayo evam, thus, antaram, difference. The difference between the knower and the known. How is that to be known? Jnana chakshusha. This is the real knowledge that is being sought. This is the knowledge that Nachiketa sought. And suppose one succeeds in doing it, what happens? Ye viduryanti te param. See, whenever there is this urge in the mind to know the truth, the ultimate truth, the truth beyond all this ramifications of speculation, ramifications of that in terms of uncertainty. One wants certitude, one wants definiteness, one wants complete clarity and no confusion. Then the mind cannot cease in its enquiry till it has removed, till it has separated these two aspects of his or her being completely. And the culmination of that process of enquiry, which is the same as this process of holding on to the present moment with full awareness. Why? This enquiry is exactly the same as this desire for truth. What will fuel that enquiry? What will prevent us from being lost in various thoughts? What will prevent us from running off in various directions mentally? What will really give us that drive is this desire for truth. This is what real inquiry is about. It's not a casual armchair speculation for a moment, listening to something, oh, it all sounds very nice, and forgetting it. But rather, this one piece of experimental datum in terms of our subjective experience, which is there with us every moment of our existence. Can we try to catch hold of this one thing that is certain? What does it lead to? This leads to abhayam. Abhayam titiryate param. Abhayam. Fear is something that is about something that can happen in the future. But once one has caught hold of the present, there is no future. So fear ceases. Regret ceases. Shoka ceases. And the mind is focused on the present moment. And the rest of it then becomes incidental and loses its grasp on our mind. Does that mean that we have to reach this final state of mind in one shot? No. But every person is capable of it to a greater or lesser extent. We are doing things. We are eating, sleeping, walking, working in offices. Doing any of that, spending every moment of our lives as consciously as we can, is the practice. And as this develops strength, the capacity for this maintaining conscious awareness of the present moment, doing one's work with full diligence, that starts developing, becomes stronger and stronger. And just as the mind is habituated in flitting from one thought to another, the mind starts developing a taste for the present moment, for the here and the now. No speculations, no theology, no doctrines. Yeah? I'll just conclude with this one little thing from Vivekananda's Song of the Sannyasi. He says, in books and temples vain thy search, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. When seas lament, let go thy hold, sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. Let go thy hold. Yeah? This moment, this causation and space and time over which we have no hold yet, try to catch hold of with great, with basically the kind of strength that a Fevicol or dendrite. I mean, there's some kind of an attachment just because we are habituated. We try to catch hold of that time and space as if it's permanent, and paradoxically do not look at, do not focus our attention at that aspect of our being which is indeed not caught in the framework of time, space, and causation, which is this little spark of consciousness in each and every one of us. We'll return to this. Next week I'll be away. We'll return to this week after next and get on with this particular lecture. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.